I will be recording this meeting, and so you'll hear a loud announcement. And after that, I will turn it over to Dr. Raggio, the chair.
This meeting is being recorded.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call to order the February 25th, 2022 meeting of the Speech Language Pathology and Audiology and Hearing Aid Dispensers Board. It is 9:01. I'd like to first call the roll to see which board members are here. If you could just say here when I call your name. Holly Kaiser.
Here.
Todd Borges.
Here.
Karen Chang.
Here.
Gilda Dominguez.
Here.
Debbie Snow.
Here.
Tulio Valdez.
Here.
Amy White.
Here.
And of course, I'm here. So we have established a quorum. And I'd like to first move forward with swearing in Dr. Valdez. So Dr. Valdez, are you sitting,
Yes.
standing with your right hand up? Could you do that? I know this is
Yes.
very weird to do it this way.
There's nobody around me. It's okay.
Okay, that's okay. All right. So this is the oath of office for board member for the Speech Language Pathology, Audiology, and Hearing Aid Dispensers Board. So if you would just repeat after me. I, please state your name,
Tulio Valdez,
do solemnly swear or affirm
solemnly swear and affirm
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I'll bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully discharge
and that I will well and faithfully discharge
the duties upon which I'm about to enter.
the duties of which I'm upon to enter.
Congratulations and welcome to the board.
Thank you.
I'd like to let the other board members, if you have any comments or anything you'd like to say to Dr. Valdez.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Yeah, we're
Thank you.
thrilled to have you join us. Yes, welcome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. I'd like to open up for public comment on this Dr. Valdez's appointment.
And this is the moderator. I wanted to let you know that if you'd like to make a comment, we'll be using the WebEx Q&A feature. We've turned that on now, and there's a question mark in the bottom right of your screen. You can hit that question mark, and in the text box, submit "I would like to make a comment," or simply the word "comment," and hit send. And then I will send an unmute you request when it is your turn to speak. Each person will have 3 minutes to speak with a 30-second warning. If you would like to comment on, let's see, we have a request for comment from Linda Pippert. Linda, I'm going to send you a request to unmute your microphone.
Thank you for your service to our licensing board.
Thank you.
Okay, and I do not see any other requests for public comment at this time. I can close that feature.
Okay, thank you. Is that closed? My screen still shows it open. Okay.
Oh, yes, it is.
Again, welcome to the board, Dr. Valdez. I'd like to move on to agenda item number 3, public comment not on the agenda.
And again, I am opening up the Q&A feature of WebEx. If you would like to suggest something for that topic that is not on the agenda, you can hit comment. You can hit the Q&A icon, type the word comment, and then send. And we'll take the people in the order received. We have a request for comment from Merritt Wilson Walker. Merritt, I will be sending you a request to unmute your microphone. You'll have 3 minutes.
I was just hoping to put an idea out to the board, especially regarding the recent waivers and just the challenges with getting information out to licensees statewide with the changes, sometimes on short notice. I was wondering if the board had considered, rather than having licensees opt in to communications from the licensing board, if it might be possible for some communications to go out to all licensees in the state. Just as a matter of being able to keep people informed, and for the sake of compliance, having people informed about interpretation around what direct supervision means, things that might not be easily accessible on the forms and information on the board website, but to have sort of memos and updates sent out, or even just including everyone in the memos that the board is currently sending out, but at this time to a closed set of licensees who have opted in. That's all.
Okay, and I do not see any other requests for public comment at this time. If you are a call-in user and you'd like to make a comment, you can push *3 and that will raise your hand. Other options are to raise your hand by the hand icon in the bottom of the WebEx screen. But at this point, we do have no further requests. Shall I close the Q&A feature?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, I'd like to move on to agenda item number 4, review and possible approval of the August 12th, 13th, 2021 board teleconference meeting minutes. And I believe that Maria is going, Lorenzo is going to summarize those for us.
Thank you, Dr. Raggio. My name is Maria Lorenzo, and I'm presenting the August minutes for the board review and approval. Included are corrections requested by the board members at the October meeting and corrections made for the purpose of clarity. Are there any questions?
Okay, are there no board members that have edits or discussion about these minutes? Seeing none, I would like to ask for a board motion, perhaps using the following language: move to approve the August 12, 13, 2021 board minute meetings. Can someone make that motion?
Hi, this is Holly Kaiser. I move to approve the August 12th and 13th, 2021 minutes.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Can we take public comment on these minutes?
Certainly, yeah. I'll open up the Q&A feature of WebEx. If you have a comment on the meeting minutes from the August meeting, you can click on the question mark in the bottom right of your screen and type the word comment and hit send, and we will take commenters in the order received. Each person will have 3 minutes to speak. And the other option is you can raise your hand if you're on a call in on a phone, you can hit *3 to raise your hand. Otherwise, you can raise your hand with the button at the bottom, shaped like a hand. I do not see any requests for public comment. Shall I close that feature?
Yes, please. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, seeing no revisions or withdrawal of the motion, I'd like to ask Sharice to call the vote.
Absolutely. Dr. Raggio,
Aye.
Ms. Kaiser,
Aye.
Mr. Borges,
Aye. Aye.
Ms. Chang,
Aye.
Ms. Dominguez,
Aye.
Ms. Snow,
Aye.
Dr. Valdez,
Aye.
Dr. White.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 5, review and possible approval of the October 7-8, 2021 board teleconference meeting minutes. Again, I think Maria will summarize for us.
Thank you, Dr. Raggio. October's meeting included 2 committee meetings and a board meeting on the Sunset Review Report regarding issues raised during the last sunset. At this meeting, the board also adopted proposed regulatory language regarding board location and processing time as a Section 100 and changes to the board-approved language regarding RP requirements and telesupervision. The board also made a recommendation on the executive officer's salary and level. And are there any questions?
Yes, this is Holly Kaiser. I noted an error on the section, the beginning, the speech language pathology practice committee meeting, page 2, paragraph 3. The sentence says that I referred to recent regulatory changes, Holly Kaiser referred to recent regulatory changes that removes all the limitations to self-study. That would not have been accurate. It probably said reduced limitations to self-study. I don't know what my exact quote was, but we did not remove all limitations.
Okay, that was noted. And are there any other discussion or issues that other board members would like to discuss with regard to these minutes? Seeing none, I would like to ask for a board motion with perhaps using the following language. Move to approve the October 7-8, 2021 board meeting minutes as amended.
This is Todd. I move to approve the October 7-8, 2021 board meeting minutes.
As amended.
Thank you. Thank you, as amended.
Is there a second?
I second it.
And we'd like to take public comment at this time on the motion.
And this is the moderator. We have opened up the Q&A feature of WebEx for public comment on the October minutes as amended. If you would like to make a comment, you can look for the question mark icon and in the text box, write the word comment and hit send. We will take comments in the order received. And I do not see any requests for comment at this time. Shall I close the public comment feature?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
With no further revisions or withdrawal of the motion, I'd like to ask Charisse to call the vote.
Absolutely. Dr. Raggio,
Aye.
Ms. Kaiser,
Aye.
Mr. Borges,
Aye.
Ms. Chang,
Aye.
Ms. Dominguez,
Aye.
Ms. Snow,
Aye.
Dr. Valdez,
Aye.
Dr. White.
Aye.
And the motion carries.
Okay, I'd like to move on to agenda item number 6, review and possible approval, of the November 22nd, 2021 board teleconference meeting minutes. And Maria will again provide us with a summary.
Thank you, Dr. Raggio. November minutes includes the board meeting regarding the Sunset Review Report, At this meeting, the board adopted the proposed sunset report. The board also nominated an elected board chair and vice chair for the new year. Are there any questions?
So I'm not seeing any requests for discussion or comments, further comments. So I would entertain a board motion using the following language if possible. Move to approve the November 22nd, 2021 board meeting minutes.
This is Gilda. I move to approve the November 22nd, 2021 board meeting minutes.
And do I have a second?
This is Holly. I second the motion.
Okay, I'd like to take public comment on this motion.
Certainly. This is the moderator, and we have opened the Q&A feature of WebEx to take public comment. If you have any discussion or comment on the November 22nd meeting minutes, you may look for the question mark icon. And once you click that, you'll have a text box. Type the word comment in the text box and click send. And we will take commenters in the order received. And I do not see any requests for public comment. Shall I close the public comment feature?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Seeing no revisions or withdrawal of the motion, I'd like to ask Sharice to call the vote.
Yes, Dr. Raggio.
Aye.
Ms. Kaiser.
Aye.
Mr. Borges.
Aye.
Ms. Chang.
Abstain.
Ms. Dominguez.
Aye.
Ms. Snow.
Aye.
Dr. Valdez.
Aye.
Dr. White.
Aye.
And the motion carries with a 7-0 to 1, with one abstaining.
Thank you. Before we move on to the next agenda item, I would personally like to thank Maria Lorenzo for the yeoman's work she did to develop and prepare these minutes. This is a great deal of work, and I think she did an excellent job. Okay, I'd like to move on to agenda item 7, which is the board chair's report. I have a couple of things I'd like to talk about. One is to draw your attention to page number 1 under tab 7 that shows our upcoming meeting dates. And we can see that the next meeting date is May 12th, 13th. And it is presumed at this point that that will be a live face-to-face meeting in Sacramento at this point. Until we hear differently, I think that is the plan. Secondly, I'd like you to look at page 2 and 3, which shows the subcommittee assignments. And I'd like you to just note which committees your name falls under, which you've all previously agreed to. I'd like to just point out to Dr. Valdez, though, that his committee assignments involve the Audiology Practice Committee. You can see your name under that committee, as well as under the Hearing Aid Dispensing Committee.
Okay.
So I don't know if you have any questions about that. I'll talk a bit in a minute about some of the upcoming issues that we're going to be looking at in those two committees, but do you have any questions at this point?
Not at this point.
Okay. So looking at the Audiology Practice Committee, just to give you a few potential issues that will be coming up that this subcommittee will be looking at, includes the audiology aid regulations, other licensing regulations, continuing education units, as well as incorporating some synchronous versus asynchronous language into regulation. In terms of the Hearing Aid Dispensing Committee, some of the potential issues, again, has to do with CEU clarifications and supervision requirements. And of course, all the other committees have potential issues and meetings going forward. For example, the Legislative Committee, we understand, has 2 bills that will be coming forward in May that they may be discussing. So are there any board member questions or discussion about these committee assignments or the issues that they may be looking at? I'm not seeing any hands up. Okay, if there is no board discussion, I'd like to ask for public comment on the board chair's report.
And this is the moderator, and we have opened up WebEx's Q&A feature to allow for public comment. If anyone has public comment on the board chair's report, and look for the question mark icon, typically in the lower right corner of your WebEx screen, or if you're using the mobile app, it's behind the 3-dot other options, and you can click on that icon and type the word comment and send, and we'll take comments in the order received. And I do not see any requests for comment at this time. Shall I close the public comment feature?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, I'd like to move on to agenda item number 8, the executive officer's report. And while there are some documents under a tab number 8, there is also a hand carry email that was sent out with an attachment that has the executive officer's remaining report items. Hopefully everybody got that.
Thank you, Dr. Rajo. I apologize if I sound muffled here. I've had some problems with my computer version of WebEx, so hopefully everyone can hear me clearly.
It is a little muffled.
Okay. I'll do my best here to try to be as clear. I'll talk a little slower. What you have before you is my executive officer's report. And the first thing I wanted to talk about was one of the largest projects that we have been undertaking as a board, and that is our business modernization project. So as you know, during this year, we've taken on quite a few initiatives within the office, including our move, including some changes and increase in staffing. We're also taking on a large undertaking with the business modernization. I know we have a few board members, so I just want to give a brief background. Our current system is what many consider a mainframe design or a legacy system. While it meets our needs for our data, it's an outdated system and it doesn't interact with newer systems, or it doesn't have new interactive features that users, consumers, or licensees would really need to conduct business and that people expect today. So what we've done is we're going to upgrade our system, and to do something like that, it takes a great deal of work, including business requirements, going through every process that we have, every transaction. So our staff have been working on that, staff and management, on coming up with processes, business requirements, developing this project, pretty much everything we do. And then Sharice and I have been involved in just trying to determine how we want this system to be. For instance, when you look at the reports that we produce, the reports are limited by our current system. It's called the CAS system. This is a type of system that would have been designed, in the 20th century, later part of the 20th century, something that we would have still been using in the 80s and 90s, and maybe even earlier than that. And then they started using it on personal computers. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to create a much more updated system. working with the Office of Information Services to come up with something that's going to be interactive. Most importantly, to our licensees and our consumers, is they will be able to do transactions online. For the past couple of years, they've been able to complete their renewals online, and that has had a great impact on licensees and on our office, the ability to do that. Down the road, we're going to allow people to actually go through the whole licensing process online and even have a system to be able to track the progress of their application. So that's what we've been working on. We've been keeping the board updated. So for those of you new board members, keep in mind that a project like this affects every aspect of the board. It affects even our normal workload, licensing, exams, enforcement, because we really need all hands on deck, especially for a small organization like ours. I want to announce something very exciting that's happened in the past few months. Back in January of 2021, the board was given an opportunity to compete for an award as part of our business modernization project. This is something that's offered through the Department of Technology, and it's called the Technology Modernization Fund. In order to achieve this or to attain a grant like this, you have to compete. It's a multi-stage process. You have to propose a submission, and we actually had to present this. Something that you don't see too much in the public or government sector, something you'd see in the private sector, but it was a competitive process. And I really want to just acknowledge some people that were a part of that. In our own office, Therese Burns and Kim Yang helped us. I was a part of that process. And then most importantly within DCA, we're really privileged to have a pretty dynamic group in the Office of Information Services. I think in all my years of working in government that spans almost 3 decades, I've never worked with such an innovative group. And a couple of people I just want to mention by name is Sean O'Connor and Melissa Alcalde. They have just been phenomenal. They brought this opportunity to us. They worked with us, partnered with us almost as if they worked in our office. So I just think we're really fortunate as a board to have people like that. Well, the good news that I guess I forgot to announce here is that we actually won the award, and it's over the amount of $400,000, and that pays a significant portion of the cost of this project. So as we move forward, we're going to continue updating you. The good news is we expect our first license type to be implemented within 6 months. And in the world of project management, that is a pretty incredible objective to be able to attain. Therese, did you want to add anything on business modernization and where we are? If not, I'll go ahead and I'll move forward.
No, I did. I'm sorry. I couldn't find my unmute button while I'm sharing my screen. Apologies. Yeah, I really want to give a wonderful shout out to DCA, Office of Information Services, and then also the Organizational Change Management Office. We worked looking through all of our processes, applications, ways to streamline, ways to make our processes better when going online. So this has been a very large multi-year undertaking. And then to get this Department of Technology funding has been a huge benefit to the board. So wonderful, great news, great things coming up, and a lot of work to get to this point. And we're really excited to be embarking on this pretty soon.
Thank you, Therese. And if I sound excited about this, and it's because I am. This is at least the third project that I've had in state government like this, and they're huge. They're huge undertakings, and to be able to have made the progress that we've made in such a short amount of time with our small group of people, it's amazing. Let me go on to administrative personnel and staffing. I just wanted to emphasize something on our staffing. We'll be looking to fill another analyst position that was created by this business modernization workload. So what you need a dedicated person, and that person likely from our staff, who's a subject matter expert, and that person, we need a backfill behind that person. So we're going to be hiring and filling behind that if we need to, and I think we will need to. We're also going to be seeking temporary help with our licensing staff as the budget permits to address our licensing processing timeframes. Before I go to the budget report, is there anything you want to add on staffing, Sharice?
Just again to share my excitement about the business modernization funding that we're getting and how that does help us kind of meet multiple goals all at the same time, including getting hopefully some temporary staff to help with processing timeframes. So again, you know, we're moving on a lot of trains on a lot of tracks and moving them all at the same time, but we're very excited to be progressing forward and to have this opportunity.
Okay, and then I'll go to, are there any questions from our board members on business modernization before I go on? If not, I will go to our budget report. And I just want to say that in addition to the TMF grant that I've been discussing, last year, we were able to get a budget change proposal approved that allowed us to get additional funding and that additional staffing that we need for this project. So I'm going to move on to our budget report. And in your materials, you have a couple of documents that I want to discuss. And one is the one that's in a landscape format that says 21-22 budget report. And then the one following that is what we call our fund condition. So the first thing that you're going to notice is right now with our budget report, this is a report that reflects through month 6, which is through December 31st. And that budget report shows that we are projected to have a surplus, a healthy condition with our budget, and that has to do with the additional funding that has come in. We will make adjustments to that, you know, as we go along. And this is something that, you know, those of you that have been on the board are used to seeing. As we get closer to the end of the year, the numbers become more and more accurate or closer to what the actuals are. But right now we're doing projection. That projection is showing a surplus of over 500,000, and that's more than what we're used to seeing. But we'll expect that to be adjusted as we move forward. The next document, I think, is a really important document to look at. And we provide these every once in a while. This is a snapshot. This is what we call a fund condition. And it's somewhat of a balance sheet. And you can kind of see up at the top the revenues that come in. And one thing to note is that we've had our fee increase that took place November 1st. This was a fee increase that happened after many years of not increasing our fees. So we've had quite a significant increase. These projections, when you go beyond 2021, they're projections, and they're somewhat conservative. We're always going to be conservative in projecting our revenue. So we'll actually probably expect more revenue than that. But the important thing to notice is right at the bottom, there's something that's called months in reserve underneath the fund balance. And that's what the legislature will look at when we're talking about sunset. That kind of tells people what our fund condition is. Typically, boards want to keep about anywhere from 4 to 6 months. It depends on the board in reserve. And those months represent the amount of months that the board could operate if it didn't have any funding. So that's a pretty healthy fund condition that we're starting to see. I think it's going to continue to get healthier as we see more of the revenue come in from our fee increase. If you look at the expenditures, I just want to point out, always reflect, there's a line that says total expenditures and expenditure adjustments. that's always going to reflect or assume that we are spending all of our budget. And we don't always spend all of our budget. We rarely spend our entire budget. So the excess amount goes to our fund balance, which will continue to, which would result in increasing the number of months in reserve. Are there any questions from the board about any of our budget issues or budget report? I would just want to add one more thing, and that is we've been discussing for the last few years the board growth and, you know, getting an office that was adequate for the growth, getting the resources that we need. Part of that is making sure that our fund is solid and that it is structurally balanced, that there's more money coming in than that is projected to go out. And you'll kind of see now, if you look at 2021, and I think this is really important to note, under total revenues, it shows that 2.2 million is coming in. But if we spent all of our budget under total expenditures and expenditure adjustments, 2.4 is going out. So that's what you call a fiscal structural imbalance. If you jump forward to 23-24, you see that we're projected to have almost 2.9 come in, and that if we spent all of our budget, we're spending 2.6. So that's a much healthier fund condition to have. In the next few years, we're going to be looking to request additional staffing. That's something we're talking about in our sunset report, and something that we want to do to make sure that we can meet better licensing timeframes and better enforcement timeframes. So that's all a work in progress. In your report, you will see that we also have information on our regulations. We're going to be talking about more about the regulations and where they are, and talking about specific language. As you know, regulations are a lot of work, and there's a lot of eyes and a lot of hands that touch the processes. So I want to commend our staff, our legal counsel that has been helping us with our regulations and those processes. Under D.
Excuse me, Paul. I'm sorry. This is
Yes.
Holly. I was sorry. I raised my hand. It was for the budget. Do you mind if I ask a question about that before you move on?
Please.
I'm just curious how, or were there adjustments made in terms of the budget for travel, lodging, all those things that we would have spent if we were meeting in person as a board? Or was that money included in case we were going to meet in person, just like a regular year before the pandemic? How was it handled?
I don't know that there were any changes to our budget because we didn't travel during the pandemic, other than we didn't spend that money during that year. But our budget has not changed for travel, as far as I'm aware. Is that correct, Therese?
I was actually going to say that there was a governor requirement that we identify a 5% cut, and we took that out of a variety of sources, a little bit from travel, a little bit from general funding, some from postage and like from all little parts of the budget where we have the discretion to lower it down. But it's not like we wiped out the travel. So last year and the year before, where we did online meetings and there wasn't much travel, that funding just went back towards the fund. If it did, we did have a banner year of enforcement expenditures last year. So any funding that wasn't going back into the fund was actually probably going towards enforcement funds. So.
Okay, thank you so much.
So just to be clear, we don't anticipate any restrictions due to our funding on travel.
No, we do not. No.
Okay, going to any other questions on that, Holly? Did we answer your question?
Thank you. You answered all my questions.
Okay. The next section I want to talk about is our licensing report, and you'll see there's a snapshot that we take on licensing cycle times, and the cycle times have reduced, which is a good thing, and expected during this time of the year, but we'll expect them to ramp back up really soon here as we get closer to the end of this school year. And by the time we talk again at our next board meeting, they'll probably increase significantly. I've also included information on our most recent practical exam report, practical exam results, the exam that took place in October 22nd and 23rd. As you may or may not know, we have been conducting the exams here in our own office. We used to have to borrow several conference rooms over at DCA headquarters, and it's much more convenient that we're able to do it here in our office, and we have all the materials and everything that we need here. So that information is there right before you. Is there any question on licensing or exams before I move on to enforcement? Okay, I will talk about enforcement here. One other thing on licensing. We include some information on the number of licenses that are issued, and what you have in that chart is licenses issued through quarter number 2, and that's going back to the handouts that are behind the report. Licenses issued, you could see that we're already through quarter 2 at about 2,400, which seems high, but these come in cycles, so they're probably right on par with what we typically expect. We're typically issuing about 3,800 licenses a year, roughly. And then you could also see that our licensing population continues to increase. During the time that I have been here, we have seen an increase in our licensing population of over 70%. So that is a significant increase, and that kind of shows why we need the growth in our staffing. So just something to note there, you can actually see the different categories and where the growth is happening specifically. But I think that's a real important thing there to point out. In enforcement,
Paul, this is Marcia. I had a
yes.
question about that.
Sure.
Just wondering if a table like that takes into account any attrition in terms of licensees who retire, die, or whatever. Is that included in these numbers somehow, or do you keep track of that?
This is Sheree, so I'm going to go ahead and chime in here. So the licensing population here is only the active, inactive, and expired and able to renew. So those that have retired, well, they've retired, but for us, it's just canceled. They expire until they cancel because we don't have a retired status yet. And so those that are canceled or expired beyond a certain date, they all fall off of these numbers. So it does fluctuate. I have seen times where it'll go up one quarter and then down because, of course, we have people coming in, but we also have people going out. So,
okay, thank you.
Yeah. And of course, if they decide to continue and stay inactive, they would still be on these rolls.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. You're welcome. Onto enforcement. If you look at our enforcement numbers, you're going to see that those numbers have the number of complaints that have come in. And when we count complaints, we also count the number of convictions received. And convictions received is subsequent arrest reports. So every licensee that gets fingerprinted, if there is an arrest, those reports come directly to us, and they result in a different type of a complaint. So the number of complaints that we had in 2021 were reduced significantly, and we're still seeing somewhat low numbers in 21 and 22. There are some numbers there I think worth noting. There's investigations that have taken longer. And sometimes when you see these investigations or AG cases that show that the time frame was long, it could be just because of one or two cases that have dragged on or have taken longer to close could result in all our numbers increasing because we have a smaller enforcement workload in certain areas. Are there any questions on the enforcement report? Any comments?
If you don't mind me chiming in, Paul, this is Charisse.
Sure.
We'd also want to point out that due to our data limitations in our systems, we don't report things as just the small segment. So everything we report is from complaint opening to that point in time. So complaint opening to the closure of a desk investigation or to Division of Investigations closure. So now we aren't able to chop up all our data very easily due to our current old systems. But so that's just a qualifier there. So everything is from, they call it cradle to grave or start to finish, right? So just that clarification on our data.
The other thing I wanted to point out is during the last year, we were actually short one whole enforcement person. We have 3 individuals that handle investigations and discipline in the office. We were short one person, and then we had another staff person who was helping us pretty intensely with the BizMod functions, and that person just happens to be an expert in licensing and enforcement, so he was invaluable with that area. So you'll see an increase in the processing times or the time frames, but we expect that to kind of fix itself. We have continued to focus on those things that are high priority and give those things attention as needed. The last thing in my report is it shows the disciplinary actions that have been adopted by the board during the past 12 months. Most of these cases you have seen and you have voted on. The cases that you may not have seen are those that are stipulated surrenders or default revocations of a license. As you know, or as most of you know, the executive officer of the board has the authority to see those and to approve those for the purpose of expediting those that need the revocations that need to move forward. So Tanisha Ashford will send you a quarterly report on all the disciplines so that you're aware of that. And then we keep note of that here on this list for you in our quarterly reports during the board meetings. Are there any questions about enforcement or any part of my report at this time from the board?
This is Marcia. I have a question. Last time, if I could address this to Charisse, we talked about difficulties with incomplete applications and that the time constraints or the time increases that occur because of these. We had a number of ideas about how to change that behavior, and I was just wondering if any update you might have on that.
Currently, we've revised our website to remind people about processing timeframes and that if the documents aren't received prior to the application or on the day of the application, that it's considered incomplete. And I think that differentiation is getting out there. We are getting more input on that. And then, of course, as we move on to the business modernization, it'll be extremely clear. People will need to upload those documents as part of the application. And so most everything except for maybe a transcript will need to be uploaded by the applicant. It'll be easier for them to see that they need to submit it at that point in time or they can't submit the rest of the application. And I think that will have a huge impact on this issue. But we are making a very concerted effort, emails, phone calls, and then on our website as well to communicate. You need to submit all the items that are on the checklist that are required for that application. And I think that is helping us with our complete processing timeframes so that we can honor those that submitted the complete application and process them as quickly as possible.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other board questions or comments? I'm sorry, Paul?
Oh, no, I just wanted to, if there are no other comments, I just had one more announcement, but I'll wait to see if there are any other comments. And if there are none, I just wanted to announce one other thing. I'm going to be presenting at the Cashier convention at the Cassia Converge conference. And that's going to be on March 26th, where I'm going to be presenting with two of our board members, and that's Holly Kaiser and Gilda Dominguez at Cassia during their general session. We expect it to be well attended, and we're pretty excited for that opportunity to continue to conduct outreach to our different licensees.
Where will that be?
That will be on March 26th, and that's in Pasadena at the Pasadena Convention Center.
Okay, are there any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I'd like to take public comment on the executive officer.
I'm sorry. This is Karen. Sorry, I was trying to talk and I accidentally didn't hit the mute button.
It's okay.
I have a question about the convention. I actually live pretty close by there. Is there a possible way I could just drop by to see? Or with credentials are needed?
Let me ask Holly or Gilda if they know more about that.
Hi, this is Holly Kaiser. I don't know the answer to the question, but I'm happy to ask the folks at Cassia leadership to find out about the answer. So Karen, you're talking about just coming in to see that general session. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or just because I'm a public member, so I just want to learn more. Okay.
And I mean, if you want to do anything beyond that, we could take this offline if you want. Okay. So I want to make sure when I ask the people in charge of the conference, asking for everything you'd like to do and find out what the, what the response is. So.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Any other questions or comments from the board members? Seeing none, I would like to take public comment at this time on the executive officer's report.
And this is the moderator, and we've opened up the Q&A feature of WebEx to take public comment. If you have any questions or comments on the executive officer's report, you can look for the question mark icon in the lower right corner of your WebEx screen, or if you're using the mobile app, it's behind the 3-dot other options icon. Or you may raise your hand, and we have instructions on the screen. We'll take comments in the order received, and each person will have 3 minutes. And I do not see any raised hands or requests for comment. Shall I close the public comment feature?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
I would just like to express my congratulations to the board, executive officer, assistant executive officer, and the staff on the award. I know that was a lot of work, and I think we should be really proud of the work that they did, and it's a rare thing. So congratulations from me. Also,
all of us.
Yes, thank you. I'd also just like to recognize the hard work of the executive officer, assistant executive officer, and the staff for providing us with this very positive report, and such a good job keeping us solvent and telling us about it. I think it's great work.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Thank you.
I'd like to maybe cover one more item on our agenda before we take a break. So if I could, I would like to move on to item number 9, the DCA update. If Brianna Miller is here, I think she is.
I'm here. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Thank you. All right. Well, good morning, board members. I'm Brianna Miller with the Department of Consumer Affairs' Board and Bureau Relations. Thank you for allowing me an opportunity to provide a department update to your board today. And before I get started, I'd like to welcome board members White and Valdez to the board. Congratulations on your appointment and thank you for your service to California consumers. So I'd like to start my update, thank you, with an update on COVID-19 safety measures. DCA appreciates all board members and staff who have continued to serve through a pandemic that has affected all of us in so many ways. As California moves past the recent Omicron surge and into a new endemic reality, a new state public health order lifted universal masking for vaccinated individuals beginning February 16th. Unvaccinated individuals must still wear face coverings in all indoor settings, and in some high-risk settings, such as healthcare facilities, face coverings will be required for everyone regardless of vaccination status. Local orders may be more restrictive to respond to community conditions. So accordingly, please be aware of changing public health guidance and remember that as state representatives, we are all expected to adhere to state and local orders while carrying out our duties. Moving on to an update on remote meetings. On January 5th, Governor Newsom signed an executive order that extends the sunset date in Assembly Bill 361, allowing boards and committees to meet remotely through March 31st, 2022. I'm happy to let you know that on January 31st, Assemblymember Quirk introduced new legislation, AB 1733, which would permanently allow boards and committees to meet remotely while also providing both virtual and physical options for members of the public to participate. If this bill is passed by the legislature and signed by the governor, it would take place immediately. Moving on to a note about vaccination verification for in-person meetings. Well, since of course we cannot be certain that AB 1733 will be enacted or when, boards should prepare for the possibility of in-person meetings after March 31st. Before attending any in-person board meetings, members must verify full vaccination with DCA's Office of Human Resources or participate in COVID-19 testing. If any members have not yet done so, please submit your proof of vaccination, as your participation in this will assist DCA in planning for testing at future meetings. We request that you please do this as soon as possible, and please do not hesitate to reach out to us if you need assistance. And I want to express my appreciation to the flexibility of board members, staff, and the public as we've all navigated this changing pandemic together. And I'm optimistic about the future and look forward to seeing you all in person one day. Moving on to note about appointments and recruitment. Whether meeting remote or in person, DCA wants to help keep your board fully seated with excellent members and diverse voices. Currently, the board has one vacancy, a licensed hearing aid dispenser appointed by the governor. DCA's communications team recently released a new communications toolkit to assist boards with member recruitment, and it's available in multiple languages. Board members can also encourage individuals to visit our Board Member Resources Center located on DCA's website, should those individuals wish to apply for an appointment. So now I'd like to transition to some updates from DCA, starting first with the Regulations Unit. The DCA's Regulations Unit was created in 2020 to address the regulatory needs of the department's boards, bureaus, and commission, while also improving the quality of the regulations. Prior to the unit's establishment, the department's boards and bureaus completed just 18 regulations in 2019. But after the unit was established, it delivered immediate results. The department more than tripled the number of regulations it completed in 2020 and 2021. And unlike prior years, none of the regulations were rejected by the State Office of Administrative Law. The unit, now in its third year, will continue to build on the success of the first 2 years and anticipates completing even more regulations this year. The unit has created new management tools that will continue to improve the process and help track from start to finish every regulation that will be completed this year so that there is complete transparency in the process. The department is looking forward to working with your board on another productive regulatory year. And next, an update on DCA's Enlightened Licensing project. The Enlightened Licensing Work Group was formed in 2020 to utilize licensing subject matter experts within the entire Department of Consumer Affairs. The group's purpose is to help individual boards and bureaus streamline and make their licensing processes more effective and efficient by utilizing best practices, information technology, and cost-saving measures. The first deep dive, which was done for the Board of Registered Nursing, has completed, and a report will be released next month with recommendations that can be used by all boards and bureaus to improve their processes. And after the successful first round, the work group will continue to begin assisting another board or bureau. Next, I'd like to introduce DCA's new Compliance and Equity Officer. As DCA looks to the future, Director Kirkmeyer continues to lead the department towards continual improvement and excellent service. DCA is pleased to announce that Tanya Corcoran has been selected to serve as the department's first Compliance and Equity Officer, effective March 2nd of this year. Ms. Corcoran brings invaluable expertise, insight, and years of hands-on experience with DCA's boards and bureaus to this new position, most recently serving as Chief Deputy Registrar of the Contractor State License Board. This position will oversee DCA's solid training and planning office, organizational improvement office, equal employment opportunity office, and the internal audits office. Bringing these offices together under Ms. Corcoran's experienced leadership will be a tremendous benefit, allowing DCA to better identify and analyze emerging issues department-wide and provide timely solutions to DCA's divisions, boards, and bureaus. And finally, I'd like to provide a reminder about board member trainings and Form 700. And that reminder is, well, board members have training and reporting requirements. Each year, members are required by law to file a Form 700 before April 1st or face penalties from the FPPC. The DCA requests that you file as soon as possible. And as a tip, I'll let you know that the best way to avoid my reminder emails and phone calls is to file early. And if anyone needs assistance, DCA's filing officer and legal counsel are available to help. Board members, additionally, who were recently appointed or reappointed need to attend the board member orientation training within a year of that appointment date. You can register for the BMOT through the Learning Management System, or LMS, which is DCA's training portal. And for 2022, live virtual trainings will be held on March 9th, June 15th, and October 12th. So as always, Board and Bureau Relations is here to help you, and if there's anything we can do to assist your board, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. And that concludes my presentation, so I'll hand it back to Chair Raggio. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you for that report. Are there any board questions or discussion items? Seeing none from the board, I'd like to take public comment on the DCA report.
And this is the moderator, and we've opened up WebEx's Q&A feature to allow for public comment on the DCA report. If you have any questions or comments, you can look for the question mark icon at the lower right of your WebEx screen on a computer, or if you're using the mobile app, it's behind the 3-dot other options. Or if you are a call-in user, you can push *3 to raise your hand. And each commenter will have 3 minutes to speak. I'll give people a moment to locate that feature. And I do not see any requests for public comment. Shall I close that portion of the meeting?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brianna, for that comprehensive report. I'd like to recommend that we take a 10-minute break at this point before we go on to the next agenda item, which may be lengthier. So 10 minutes, or let's say 10:15. Okay, I'd like to reconvene the board meeting of the Speech Language Pathology and Audiology and Hearing Aid Dispensers Board. It is 10:16, and I'd like to move on to agenda item 10, which is update on speech and hearing related DCA waivers related to the COVID-19 state of emergency. And I'd like to turn it over to Sharice Burns to lead this discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Raggio. So again, the waivers that were approved by DCA were all under the COVID-19 state of emergency and the executive orders that the governor issued pursuant to that. And so these allowed the Department of Consumer Affairs to waive statutory and regulatory requirements with respect to professional licenses issued under the Business and Professions Code, which includes our board. So that is how we got the DCA waivers. We worked really hard to get those submitted as quickly as possible and worked with DCA to keep continuing them as long as we could and keep pressing to help continued services to our consumers. And so the waivers were wound down towards the end of last year, but due to the surge with Omicron, DCA did go ahead and extend a couple waivers. And so those that are active right now are the modification of reactivation requirements for speech language pathologists. So that was most recently extended on January 11th. And that allows the reactivated licenses to continue operating until April 1st of 2022. The other one is the modification of the direct monitoring requirements for RPE licenses and the direct supervision requirements for the speech language pathology assistants or SLPAs. And that was also extended on January 11th. And that waived the in-person supervision requirements for both of those license types through March 31st, 2022. We do not have any indications that these will be extended any further. And of course, all DCA waivers would expire and go along with the governor's executive order once that's rescinded as well. And so just so that everyone else is aware, we've listed the expired waivers that were previously enacted and when they expire. That includes the continuing education requirements for all licensees. And that was a modification of the requirement altogether. So it excused people from accruing the CEs altogether up until the point that the waiver expires, and then they have 6 months to accrue those. It did not waive the live requirement, just the requirement of CE altogether. So the live requirements do stand. And so 6 months after the date of each order is when those CE requirements need to be met. And that would be March 28th of 2022. And of course, that's active licensees only. So active, which means practicing. So the other waivers that have expired as well were the modification on limitations for hearing aid dispenser temporary licenses and trainee licenses. Those all expired last fall as well. And the modification of limitations and requirements for extending RPE licenses so that those people could continue to accrue experience beyond that 1 year. So, and then also I believe for the purposes of taking the examination. So all of those have expired. We don't expect to hear any additional information on further extensions of these waivers from DCA. And again, we had to request them all from DCA and DCA has to approve them. That's not something the board unilaterally gets to do. So there's no action on this item, and this is provided for your informational purposes. At this time, board members, do you have any questions?
I'm not seeing any hands go up for questions or discussion about this. I'll give you another few seconds. Unmute yourself if you have a question. Okay, not seeing any. I'd like to take public comment on this update.
And this is the moderator, and we've opened up WebEx's Q&A feature to facilitate public comment on the DCA waivers. If you'd like to make a comment, you can look for the question mark icon in the lower right corner of your WebEx screen, or if you're on the mobile app, it's behind the 3-dot other options. If you are a call-in user, you can hit *3 to raise your hand. And we will take comments in the order received, and each person will have 3 minutes to speak. And I do not see any requests for comment. Shall I close the public comment feature?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, I'd like to move on to agenda item 11, which is an update on the board's 2022 sunset review. I believe Paul is going to give us an update.
Yes, good morning. And I just wanted to give a background on the whole sunset process again for our new board members. So bear with me, I'm going to repeat some information that we've talked about in the past. One thing to note is that every board is given a sunset date or an expiration date. And ours was originally based on our last sunset report set at January 1, 2022. Because of the pandemic and all the delays that were caused with that, we were extended to January 1 of 2023. So every year, the Assembly Business and Professions Committee and the Sunset Business, Professions and Economic Development Committee create a joint committee to hold these sunset review oversight hearings of each board. This is an opportunity for the board to discuss what it's done during the last 4 years, kind of a report card, and for DCA, the legislature, boards and bureaus, the stakeholders, all are included in this process. But it also gives this oversight committee an opportunity to ask questions, address any concerns, or express any concerns that they might have with the board. I know Dr. Raggio was a part of developing our sunset report last time and was also a key in helping us this year. But typically, as you know, the board has been working on this sunset review, and we did this mostly over the summer of 2021. We turned in our sunset report in January. And the hope is that after getting the sunset report, we get these questions and kind of have an overview of what the concerns are. Just yesterday, we were actually told when the sunset oversight hearings were going to be held. So they're going to be holding hearings that include the Speech Language Pathology, Audiology, and Hearing Aid Dispensing Board on March 10th. At that point, we're going to answer questions and address any concerns that they might have. The goal is then for a bill to be created. We have some statutory changes, some issues that we want to address that are included in the sunset report. And then that bill would kind of make its way through the legislature during the summer of 2022. Let me just go back. On March 10th, the sunset review oversight hearings are going to be including our board chair, Dr. Raggio, our board vice chair, Holly Kaiser, and myself. We're going to be presenting to this committee and answering their questions. Once we've addressed concerns and the sunset bill itself will make its way through the legislature in the summer of 22, and then our hope is that the bill would be approved in the fall of 22, so that by January 1, 2023, we have a new sunset date. Typically, those are 4-year sunset dates. Do we have any questions on sunset or how that works? I wanted to just update you that we're now at the point where we're going to have a hearing soon. BCA is also willing to work with us on any way that they can assist us in preparing for the hearing. Is there anything that you might have to add, Sharice, before I ask if there are any questions from the board?
No, just that, we will be providing as much information and questions and answers for the Joint Sunset Committee. And then, of course, the legislative process will take over after the hearing and determine, how much of the provisions we requested in the sunset will go under the bill. So it's kind of a work in progress, but excited to have a hearing date. So.
Thank you, Dr. Roger. That's the end of my report. I don't know if if any of the board members have questions.
Could you just verify something for me? Did you say that these B&P committee and the economic development, that they will not be asking for formal questions to be responded to during the hearing? Did you say that?
No, they're actually, that's what they will be asking. That's what we would expect them to ask their questions.
But will they be giving those questions to us in advance?
I haven't received yet. I think we expect to receive some questions here in the near future, or a background document.
Okay, that would be very helpful, those who have to testify that day, to see what their interests and concerns are with our report. I hope everybody got a copy of it. I thought it was very well done, and we should have gotten it at least maybe 3 weeks ago or so. All board members got a copy of this review report? Anybody?
Yes.
Maybe that's a better question. Okay, good.
Yes, I did.
Okay, do any board members have any questions or discussion items about this, the sunset review? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands go up from the board members. So I'd like to take a public comment on the sunset review for 2022.
And this is the moderator. We've opened up the public comment Q&A feature of WebEx. If anyone has any comments or questions about the sunset review, you can look for the question mark icon, typically in the lower right corner of your WebEx screen, or if you're on a mobile device, behind the 3-dot other options. Or if you are a call-in user, you can raise your hand by pressing *3. And we will take comments in the order received. Everyone will have 3 minutes to speak. And I do not see any requests for comment at this time. Shall I close the public comment feature?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, I'd like to move on to agenda item 12, which is an update on the board's filing of public comment regarding the U.S. Food and Drug Administration's proposed rule on medical devices, ear, nose, and throat devices, establishing over-the-counter hearing aids. So as you may recall, let's see, somebody has their mic on that's kind of loud.
I'm going to mute Paul Sanchez.
Okay, as you might recall, we had to submit our comments, as did the rest of the nation and interested parties, by January 18th, 2022, which we did. And I don't want to read the entire report. I just want to pick out the main items that we wanted to express to the FDA about over-the-counter hearing aids. We did remind them that our role is to protect the public while exercising our licensing, regulatory, and disciplinary functions. And that in relation to the fitting and selling of hearing aids, we want to make sure that the individuals who do so fit them with practices that are consumer protection minded. So the first question we looked at was when we looked at these proposed regulations, and that was our goal here, by the way, is to, there is a comment period, I think it's 6 months comment period for people to, interested parties, stakeholders, to present their concerns. And one thing we mainly had to look at is, did these regulations or proposed regulations impede the board's regulation of its licensees or enforcement of California law in this regard? And the general consensus is that the regulations did not cause any difficulty in that sense. However, while the board's ability to continue regulating and fitting and the sale of prescription hearing aids is a major consumer protection issue, we wanted to make sure that selling of OTC by unlicensed vendors would not cause potential consumer harm. So we made a number of recommendations, expressed our concerns, as you see listed here. I think it's concern 1 through 5. You can see the term, the first one is the term dispenser, apparently is used throughout the proposed regulations. And as you know, in board language, a dispenser is a licensee. And that's, we feel, confusing to the consumer. So we are asking that the term dispenser per se, as it relates to OTC hearing aids, be removed or replaced with a different descriptor so that the consumer is not confused by that. Our second concern was we wanted to make sure that the outside packaging labeling requirements were digestible, readable, digestible by the consumer. We think that it's somewhat unrealistic for the FDA to expect that extensive packaging labeling requirements had to have a fixed or a font size that was required. Otherwise, we just don't think, especially elderly consumers, would be able to read and understand what they were looking at. We also wanted them to have a consumer notification in the outside packaging regarding locked or proprietary software. And you might recall that the board sponsored legislation in 2020, which was California Assembly Bill 435, that requires that anyone who dispenses hearing aids in California would have to have that are locked or use proprietary software for programming, would have to have a consumer recognize that that is the case. That the problem being that if you have such software, you're limited to where you can go for reprogramming. You may have to actually even buy a new hearing aid if the entity where you bought it has gone out of business. There are a number of consumer concerns about that were arguments that were successfully made in getting Assembly Bill 435 passed, so that providers had to get a written signature or initials from a consumer, making sure they were purchasing locked hearing aids or locked software. So we made the recommendation that we make a minimum font size and that we put the locked hearing aid information on the labeling. Concern number 3 was the lack of federal return policy. That in itself is a severe, I would say, consumer protection offering. So the proposed regulations do not specifically require the OTC hearing aids have a minimum federally consistent return policy. It is our belief that most manufacturers will provide that, but we thought it needed to be spelled out and to be perfectly clear to the consumer that a return policy that's federally mandated would be in place on the outside packaging, so people know what their return rights would be. Concern number 4 was potential for consumer harm from lack of gain limits or warning on the dangers of prolonged use of upper limit outputs. So without getting too deep into esoteric language about this, hearing aids have a certain amount of power, a certain amount of gain, if you will, in which they take a given sound and amplify it. And currently, the proposed regulations don't have a gain limit. They have an output limit. That is, the ceiling of the hearing aid can't be any louder than a certain amount. And they didn't make any gain stipulations. And it's the feeling that their justification for that was they thought they could, if sounds were too loud, they could turn down the volume, they could turn it off, they could take it out of their ear, or they could move away from the loud environment. And our contention is that I think it's somewhat challenging to expect that all consumers will do that, because there's so much noise-induced hearing loss in this country as it is, that it's pretty clear that people don't know how to avoid it very well. if we're talking about elderly people who might have difficulties with mobility or cognition or anything like that, may not be able to implement those remedies as easily or quickly as they're saying. So our recommendation is that at a minimum, the FDA should have a warning on the outside packaging to advise consumers about the dangers of prolonged exposure to loud sounds, or what the upper limits are, and stipulate either a gain value or a gain range to keep the consumer safe from being exposed to loud sounds. Our last recommendation was that age verification at the time of purchase is not stipulated, and we believe that since this is designed, these proposed regulations are designed for sales for people 18 and above, some sort of verification of age should be implemented at the time of purchase. It's particularly difficult, of course, once people are buying things online to verify that kind of thing, but we are still making that recommendation that we verify age to avoid any consumer protection issues having to do with children or underage consumers. Anyway, we have submitted it on time, as did everyone else. We're waiting to see their responses. They do have to look at everybody's submissions, that is, the FDA does. How much they're going to respond to us with individual comments is not clear at this point. But anyway, we did our best to get those in on time and to make important comments. So are there any board questions or discussion items about our response to the FDA OTC proposed regulations?
Yes, I have a question. This is Holly Kaiser.
Yeah, I see your hand.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I first of all, I thought the report, the letter is excellent. You know, it was a very thorough discussion we had as a board, and I think this summarized everything really well. I guess my one question is on concern number 5. When we're talking about verification of people younger than 18, but then we say, however, it would not require sellers to verify the age of purchasers, or in the case of online or mail order sales, the age of the recipient. I understand that's pretty much impossible to control, knowing how old the person is that's ordering it, and they may order it for someone else that is of age. But I wondered why it was completely excluded as something that would be attempted, you know, could at least get that information when someone's ordering online. That's my question.
So you're asking why the FDA did not make that stipulation?
No, it sounded like in our response, we're saying it would not require sellers. Like we're saying, okay, so we understand, we're just going to accept that if someone orders online, we're not going to be asking for their age verification. Or maybe I'm misinterpreting this.
The recommendation is, said the board suggests requiring age verification at the time of purchase as an added consumer protection measure. So we are.
Yeah, I guess we are. Okay, so including online and mail order. I just thought because it said, however, it would not require sellers. I thought we were saying that we understand, you know, I just thought we're accepting things.
I think the FDA is saying that they're not requiring that. We see that as a potential problem. But you're quite right, Holly, that we don't have much control over that. And it's the concern is that parents who see this as a way to purchase less expensive hearing aids without any kind of professional support is a danger to consumers. So
okay, and you're helping me read this better. I was kind of looking at it like that was our statement, however, but you're just making a comment on the way it is with the way, you know, the way they've written it, and our comment is that it's important under all circumstances to be verifying age. So, all right, thank you for the clarification.
And we hope we're not the only ones who made that recommendation. It's probably one of the biggest dangers with these hearing aids. Although, you know, we don't have any data yet to suggest, and there are companies already out there doing that, even though these proposed regulations have not been accepted by the FDA. There are entities already out there online selling hearing aids, and we have no idea how much are being distributed to people under 18. Any other board comments or questions? Okay, we'll certainly inform the board when and if we hear anything back from the FDA. At this point, I would like to take public comment on this report.
And this is the moderator, and I've opened up the public comment feature of WebEx. You can click on the question mark and type the word comment, or you may raise your hand. And at this point, I do see a raised hand from someone representing as Bryce Docherty. I'm going to send you a request to unmute your microphone, Bryce, and you'll have 3 minutes. And you're unmuted.
Great, thank you. Bryce Docherty on behalf of the Hearing Healthcare Providers of California. We've, in addition to the comments that the board has provided in the packet, we've also provided Paul a document that the International Hearing Society has put together, and they include some problems and potential solutions around 10 different items in the language, and they also ask at the end 3 pretty important clarifying questions. So I would just recommend that the board read through that document as well, and HHP endorses all of the concerns and issues raised in the IHS document and the questions that were asked. So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And I do not see any other requests for public comment. Shall I close the Q&A feature?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, I'd like to move on to agenda item number 12. Excuse me, I'm sorry, 13. Regulatory report, update, review, and possible action on board regulation packages. And I believe Maria Lorenza is going to provide that update.
Thank you, Dr. Raggio. An update on our regulations that we have currently working on. Item A is regulations regarding speech language pathology assistance requirements. The board approved regulatory language on August 13th, 2021. Board staff are working on preparing the required regulatory documents. Once these documents are complete, the regulatory proposal will be submitted to DCA Legal for pre-review process. Item B is regulations regarding uniform standards. The board approved regulatory language on August 13th, 2021. Board staff are working on preparing the required documents. Once those documents are completed, the regulatory proposal will be submitted to DCA Legal for pre-review process. We have item 7, which is regulations regarding required professional experience, direct supervision requirements, and tele-supervision. On August 24th, 2021, board staff submitted the completed regulatory proposal to DCA to start the initial department review process. Board staff are still working with DCA on the documents. Once those are complete, DCA will submit them to the Business, Consumer Services, and Housing Agency for review. Item D is regulations regarding dispensing audiologist exam requirement. This regulatory proposal is in the regulations development phase. Board staff are working with DCA Legal to address any concerns with the board approved regulatory text. Once the texts are ready, board staff will have the board review and discuss the regulatory text at a future board meeting. Item E is regulations regarding board location and processing time. The board approved regulatory language on October 8th, 2021. Board staff are working on preparing the required regulatory documents, and once those are complete, we will submit them to DCA Legal for review process as a Section 100 change without regulatory effect. Item F is regulations regarding continuing professional development requirements for speech language pathologists, audiologists, and dispensing audiologists. This regulatory proposal is in the regulation development phase. Board staff are working with DCA Legal to address any concerns with the text, and once they're ready, we'll bring them for board review and discussion at a future board meeting. Lastly, we have discussion and possible action to amend regulations regarding notice to consumers. This regulatory proposal is in the regulations development phase. Revisions to board approved regulatory text requires review and approval by the board, and we have a separate memo and the text available for discussion. Are there any questions or comments on the other items, the previously reported regulatory items?
Not
All right. Oh, sorry.
I just want to compliment again the format for this information. It's really makes it clear where we stand in each of these packages.
Thank you, Dr. Raggio.
I'd like, if there are no board questions or discussion items, I'd like to open for public comment on the regulatory report with regard to items 13A through 13F.
And this is the moderator, and we've opened up the Q&A feature of WebEx to facilitate public comment. If you have a comment on any of the items in the regulatory report, you can look at the question mark icon, type the word comment, and hit send. We do have a request for comment. First one is from Merritt Wilson Walker. I will send you a request to unmute your microphone, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Thank you very much. I was hoping to comment regarding agenda point 13C regarding RPE supervision regs, and kind of how that ties in with a previous agenda item of the likelihood of the current waivers dropping at the end of March. I mean, I understand what you're saying about the timing of those regs being possibly updated and there being, a due process before those might go into effect. But I do hope that the board had the opportunity to review some of the input from licensees, including the survey submitted by CASHA, of just the implications for consumers and licensees of the waiver drops. I'm just wondering if there will be a lapse between those waivers dropping and the likelihood of these regulations possibly amending supervisory requirements going into effect. And just wanted to note that there are repercussions, of course, for consumers and providers. Thank you.
Would either Sharice or Paul like to address that concern?
Absolutely. This is Sharice. I'll go ahead and address it because there will absolutely be a gap between when the waivers are discontinued by DCA and under the state of emergency and when the regulatory process goes through. Each regulatory process is a very deliberate public process that is required by statute and by the Department of Consumer Affairs. And so the board approves language, which it has done last year, and that it approved on, and that's October 21, 2021 meeting, at which point the telesupervision was to be kept at 50%, I believe. So that is what was approved last year in October. And then, of course, we have to prepare all of the documents. It has to go through the DCA and then the Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency review before it can go to the Office of Administrative Law for public comment to start. So right now, when we look at these, the 13C, which is the RPE direct supervision, we are currently in the process of trying to get DCA and agency review so that we can go to public comment. When we go to public comment, it'll be published in the register. It'll start a 45-day public comment, at which point the board will receive public comments and then address those public comments at the following board meeting. So that board meeting, we will take all the comments, summarize them, provide them to the board, and then also make a response. At that point, the board has the opportunity to address those public comments and or make substantive or non-substantive changes to the regulations. If substantive changes are made to the regulations, that would start another 45-day public comment period. If it is a non-substantive change, that would be a 15-day public comment period. After that point, you would go ahead and any additional comments, you would address them as well. Again, this process can get long and drawn out. And I don't want to discourage public comment. I think that is the most important part of this process. And that's why we have, these rules on Office of Administrative Law, making sure we follow those things and that we take and consider public comment. But just so everyone's aware, when we take the public comment, if we make substantive changes, that goes out again for 45 days. And so you can see where sometimes this might go on in a couple cycles. If not, if we just have one 45-day public comment, we make any changes or we don't make any changes, then it goes to the Office of Administrative Law. They have a set amount of time to make sure we have followed all the procedures properly, that we meet all the legal requirements and approve or disapprove those regulations, at which point it will go into effect at the next quarterly push out by Office of Administrative Law for regulations. So oftentimes it does seem like a very long and drawn out process. Essentially, the board, once we give that public notice, has a 1-year time frame to promulgate, get these regs into the Office of Administrative Law for review and to finalize them. So unfortunately, it is long and drawn out, which is what gives the public comment and gets this very robust public process, which is a good thing. But it also sometimes can be concerning for people because it does cause, there is the delay. So there will be a gap. Of course, we are trying to go as quickly as we can to affect these changes, and we'll continue to work as quickly as we can to do that. But we do have to follow all the laws and public comment requirements, and then the Office of Administrative Law timelines. So I think Paul has his hand raised. I don't know if we need to unmute him.
He does.
Yes, I just wanted to add that we appreciate the information that we received from Castro, the survey results. And I think it's really good for us to know and understand what people are going through, out in the world of speech language pathology. And frankly, that was the type of information that we used when we presented this to DCA. And DCA executive staff was very helpful in extending the waiver to where we are today. I think when we're looking at these regulations, it's really important to understand where we are today as far as supervision requirements, what's currently in our regulations, where we've been because of the pandemic. The emergency measures are separate from the regulations that we're working on currently. And I think those regulations are designed to work outside of the emergency situation that we're in. And as Charisse mentioned, these are long, drawn out processes, and the board is looking out for, what are adequate RP supervision requirements. So I just think it's really important that we look at this through the lens of these are not emergency procedures that we're looking at. We're looking at what are going to be the standard supervision requirements for the RPE. So we're working hard and hope to, make progress here soon so that these regulations can be adopted with OAL. Thank you.
And we do have one more request for comment from Meng Ting Xie. I'm going to send you a request to unmute your microphone, and you will have 3 minutes. And you're unmuted.
Hi, I wanted to second the previous caller's comment about the in-person and telesupervision waivers, and just basically second that comment and ask if there were any considerations being made to extend the waiver through the end of the year.
This is Sharice, and I'm going to go ahead and respond to that question if that's okay, Dr. Braggio.
Yes, please.
The board doesn't have any ability to extend the waivers. The board is at the mercy, for lack of a better word, of the executive order and the Department of Consumer Affairs extending that waiver. And so we have expressed our support adamantly for extending the waivers and continuing to extend them throughout the state of emergency. But again, we can ask, and then we just have to see if DCA will extend it. And thankfully, through our urging and through collaboration with DCA, we were able to get an extension, get DCA to extend those waivers during this most recent surge. But outside of being able to ask for it, we can't ensure any extensions beyond that.
And I do not see any further requests for public comment nor any raised hands. Shall I close the Q&A feature?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
I'd like to go back to the regulatory changes for item number 13G. I was wondering, Maria, if I could impose on you to just, since we have a motion ahead of us here regarding this particular regulatory package, if you could just reiterate what it is that this is doing, and I can direct the board members to look at the document behind the pink page separator to look at the language for this regulatory item.
Thank you, Dr. Raggio. So 13G is a proposed regulatory package that the board has approved, but has been amended to include changes that the board staff and legal counsel has identified, and so now requires board review and approval. This regulation will begin the process to implement, interpret, and make specific the provisions of Business and Profession Code Section 138, which was enacted by the legislature to increase consumer protection. This mandate had required the board to begin the process June 30th in 1999, but due to governance structure changes, which culminated in 2010 and limited staff resources, the progress to adopt these regulations have been delayed. On January 24, 2020, board staff submitted revisions of the adopted proposed text to DCA for review. And so we have identified the changes. And if you flip over, there will be a summary of changes that are highlighted in yellow. In the first attachment, attachment A, is the revised version of the language, and attachment B is the adopted language that was adopted by the board February 9th. That way you could see what the difference are in between the two languages. One thing we did change were the phone number. We had, since now that we've moved to a new building, we changed the phone number in both sections. We also, to make it consistent in the notice methods, clients, patients, representatives, making sure that they're inserted in the right location for the right document. And then we also have a placeholder for a font size if the board wishes to include a font size for the notice method in B2. That was the we noticed that method of notice didn't have a font size to the consumer notice. So we've included those information for discussions and review. And if you wish to approve the regulatory language, we have a suggested motion language. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Maria. So are there any other questions about this regulatory language? or its intent by board members? Seeing none, I have been given a recommended motion language that I'd like to read, and I would entertain a board member, if they so wish, to move this motion forward. And the language reads as follows. Move to approve the proposed regulatory text for sections 1399.129 and 1399.157.1. Direct staff to submit the text to the Director of the Department of Consumer Affairs and the Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency for review. And if no adverse comments are received, authorize the executive officer to take all steps necessary to initiate the rulemaking process, make any non-substantive changes to the package, and set the matter up for a hearing if requested. If no adverse comments are received during the 45-day comment period and no hearing is requested, authorize the executive officer to take all steps necessary to complete the rulemaking and adopt the proposed regulations of sections 1399.129 and 1399.157.1 as noticed.
This is Karen. I second.
Actually, I need somebody to move that motion. Karen, would you like to do that?
Yeah, I move it. Do I just say I move it? Move
yes.
the motion.
So, yeah. And do I have a second?
Excuse me. This is Holly. I second.
Okay, I'd like to at this point take public comment on the regulatory language for item number 13G.
And this is the moderator, and I've opened up the public comment feature of WebEx. If anyone would like to comment on this modified language, you can click the question mark icon, type the word comment, and hit send. You may also raise your hand, and if you are a call-in user, you can use *3 to raise your hand. And I do not see any requests for public comment. Shall I close the public comment feature?
Yes, please. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, seeing no comments, discussions, or dissent, I'd like to ask Sharice to call the vote on this motion.
Absolutely. Dr. Raggio.
Aye.
Ms. Kaiser.
Aye.
Mr. Borges.
Aye.
Ms. Chang.
Aye.
Ms. Dominguez.
Aye.
Ms. Snow.
Aye.
Dr. Valdez.
Aye.
Dr. White.
Aye.
And the motion carries.
Thank you. I'd like to move on to agenda item 14, which is our legislative report, including an update, review, and possible action on proposed legislation. And I believe Heather Olivares will provide us with an update.
Board members, Heather Olivares, Legislation and Regulation Analyst for the board.
Heather, I can't hear you very well.
This is Heather Olivares. Is this better?
A little, yes.
I'm the Legislation and Regulation Analyst for the board. In your packet, you should have received a memo from me regarding updates on legislation. Under Section A is the legislative calendar and deadlines that have recently passed and are coming up. The first deadline that passed was January 31st, was the last day for each house to pass bills introduced in 2021 in their house. And then February 18th, which just passed last week, was the last day for bills to be introduced that will be moving through the process this year. Coming up on April 29th is the last day for policy committees to hear fiscal bills introduced in their house. May 6th is the last day for policy committees to hear non-fiscal bills introduced in their house. And May 20th is the last day for fiscal committees to hear bills introduced in their house. The board has one bill up today that board staff is recommending a position. That is AB 1662 regarding licensing boards disqualification from licensure criminal conviction. This bill has been referred to the Assembly Business and Professions Committee. This bill would require boards to determine if a prospective applicant may be disqualified from licensure based on information provided by the prospective applicant regarding their criminal conviction. The prospective applicant may make this request by mail or email at any time, including before obtaining any training or education required for licensure or paying any application fee. Board staff is recommending an oppose unless amended position. We estimate potentially receiving 80 requests for a predetermination per year, which will increase the licensing and enforcement staff workload by 5 hours per request for an annual workload increase of 400 hours of staff time. Additionally, this bill would require board staff to make a predetermination based on information provided by the prospective applicant, which may not be completely accurate, leading to an inaccurate predetermination that the prospective applicant may rely upon when deciding whether to pursue licensure or the education and experience required for licensure. In order to address these concerns, board staff recommends the board adopt an oppose unless amended position with suggested amendments to require the prospective applicant to pay a fee to cover the costs of the request for predetermination and submit the board's live scan form or fingerprint hard card with the required fingerprinting fee to get accurate conviction information from the Department of Justice and the Federal Bureau of Investigation, which board staff will then use to evaluate and make a predetermination. Are there any questions regarding this bill?
Heather, would you mind giving us a little background again on the impetus for this language?
So at this time, since the bill was just recently introduced, we don't have much background information regarding whether there is a sponsor for this bill or if I think oftentimes with some of the bigger boards in DCA, this is more of an issue, and then they come up with this legislation that is blanket for all boards when maybe it's a few boards that it's an issue with. But the general idea is to try to make it so applicants can get ahead of the curve as far as not going to school if they do have a conviction that would disqualify them for licensure. And this is all in line with the direction that the legislature has been going recently as far as working to ease barriers to licensure as far as people with criminal convictions.
Yes.
This is Charisse. Can I just also chime in a little here? I mean, in prior years when the legislature was discussing this and there were stakeholder meetings, it almost was talked about as the perception of being denied. So people don't even go to school. And it almost seems like this could be a solution in search of a problem, but without having more background data from the author on why or what it is, it kind of goes in line with those discussions from a few years ago.
It appears to me that paying the fee is the smaller issue here. It's being able to do this without any kind of training. I don't know if they're thinking that will occur, but that's a bigger concern for me.
It's honestly quite interesting because it presumes they've already been convicted of a crime before doing any educational work, and that they're going to want to get that determination at that point in time, as where a lot of times what we see is they are convictions that are either multiples or sometimes even those that were convictions that occurred during their education or right after their educational career. So it's quite an interesting small focus right there, but potentially a very large workload for us. So,
but would we want to include any aspect of our opposition that that it allows for this application to be made before any training is done or testified to in some way? Should it be part of our opposition?
I don't want to speak for Heather, but I do think it is confusing for applicants because it's like a pre-application to determine one thing, but without checking all of the others, including up into does their education qualify for licensure and so on and all the other things. So it is kind of an interesting and potentially confusing thing for those people that try to use it.
So you're looking at it as a pre-application to the application, which then...
Yes.
Okay. Okay, then that makes more sense.
Hi, Dr. Rajo. This is Paul. I just wanted to kind of emphasize that it says any prospective applicant. So it's pretty open-ended. At any time, anyone would be able to contact the board and say, I'm thinking about this possible career and ask for that. And I've had that happen with other boards and even with this board where someone would call and ask a hypothetical question. But in this case, we would have to give them a pretty definitive answer on whether they would be disqualified or not. And that could be that's an unknown workload, but it could be a significant workload.
And according to this bill as it's written right now, it would be based on what they reported to us and not whatever is all part of the official record on their conviction.
And I think that's the biggest piece right there is sometimes what we see is they may have been arrested for a certain charge, but then when that is adjudicated, it might end up being a different charge. And if they just report to us, well, my conviction was this charge, but we don't have any kind of background of what exactly happened that led up to it, be making a determination on not the entire story.
Okay, is there any more board discussion? Any questions? Seeing none, I'd like to ask for a board motion, and I do have some provided language. If someone would like to move this, I'll read it for you. Move to adopt and oppose unless amended position on AB 1662, unless the bill is amended to require the prospective applicant to pay a fee to cover the costs of the request for predetermination and submit the board's live scan form or fingerprint hard card with the required fingerprinting fee to get accurate conviction information from the Department of Justice and the Federal Bureau of Investigation.
So move.
Do I have a second?
This is Gilda, I second.
And I'd like to take a public comment on this motion at this time.
And this is the moderator. And if you have a public comment on the AB 1662 and the discussion involved, you can look for the question mark icon in the lower right of your WebEx screen, or if you're on a mobile device, it's behind the 3-dot other options. Type the word comment and push send. Or if you are a calling user, you can raise your hand by pushing *3. And I do not see any requests for public comment. Shall I close public comment at this time?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Seeing no other discussion or dissent, I'd like to ask Sharice to call the vote.
Yes, Dr. Raggio.
Aye.
Ms. Kaiser?
Aye.
Mr. Borges?
Aye.
Ms. Chang?
Aye.
Ms. Dominguez?
Aye.
Ms. Snow?
Aye.
Dr. Valdez?
Aye.
Dr. White?
Aye.
And the motion carries.
Thank you. I'd like to ask Heather to continue her discussion of the legislative report, starting with 14C.
So the next section is bills that the board took a position on last year, and this is just an update of the final disposition of those bills. The first one is AB 29 regarding state bodies and meetings, which would have required the board to make all writings and materials for publicly noticed meetings available on the board's website at least 72 hours prior to the meeting. This bill is dead. It was held under submission in the Assembly Appropriations Committee. The next bill is AB 107, Licensure for Veterans and Military Spouses, which requires the board to issue a temporary license within 30 days to applicants currently licensed in another state who are married to or in a domestic partnership with an active duty member of the military currently stationed in California. You remember we had an oppose unless amended position on this bill with some concerns regarding the temporary license expiring upon denial of an application for permanent licensure. We were able to get amendments to this bill that address those concerns, and the bill did end up being signed by the governor. The next one is AB 225, Department of Consumer Affairs, Boards, Veterans, Military Spouses, Licensures. This bill was similar to AB 107, and this one ended up not moving forward. So that bill is AB 555 regarding special education assistive technology devices. This bill would have authorized a local education agency or special education local plan area to retain, sell, or dispose of an assistive technology device if the market value of the device is less than $5,000. This bill is dead. It never moved forward in the legislature. And then AB 5885 regarding the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act for teleconferencing. This bill would have amended current law regarding public meetings held by teleconference to only require the agenda to include a primary physical meeting location where the public may physically attend and participate. Board meetings attending remotely would not have had to have their location posted on the agenda. This bill did die, but there is a similar bill that was introduced again this year. And then AB 1026 regarding business licenses for veterans, which would have required boards to grant a 50% fee reduction for an initial license for military veterans who provided satisfactory evidence with their application. This bill did die. It was held under submission in the Assembly Appropriations. AB 1361, Child Care and Developmental Services for preschools. This bill would have required specific actions to be taken prior to disenrolling or suspending a child due to a behavior issue. The board had an opposed unless amended position with concerns regarding a provision that will authorize a person with at least a master's degree in speech and language pathology to provide early childhood mental health consultation services. This bill is dead. It was held under submission in the Subcommittee, but the author has reintroduced the bill again this year. And then SB 772, Professions and Vocations Citations for Minor Violations. This bill would have prohibited the assessment of an administrative fine for minor violations if the licensee corrects the violation within 30 days. This bill is dead. It never moved forward to the legislature. And that is all of the bills that the board took a position on last year. Any questions about it?
Okay, I don't see any questions regarding the bills in 14C, but I would like to give the board a moment to consider whether they have questions or discussion aspects. Not seeing any. Heather, do you want to go on with the discussion of the D, the bills under D?
Yes. So in section D are bills that we were watching over the past year. So I provided a final update on them. But I won't go over all of those since we didn't have an active position. I just wanted to couple that were amended in January, but then have already died. So we just provided them as a FYI. But the first one is AB 227, governor appointments. This bill would have required the public announcement of a governor appointee to disclose any contribution of $1,000 or more to the governor's campaign for 12 months. And then the other one is AB 1498, members of boards within the Department of Consumer Affairs per diem. This bill would have required boards to define day that the member discharged official duties as either the accumulation of 8 hours spent in the discharge of official duties or the day on which the board member performed an official duty for purposes of the for each day. And then there are a couple of new bills that were introduced this year that we'll be watching for now and may weigh in future meeting. First one is AB 1687. This is regarding the governor's powers to suspend statutes and regulations during a state of emergency. This bill would limit the governor's authority during a state of emergency to only suspend the statutes and regulations of a state agency that are connected with the specific conditions of a state of emergency. And then the next one is AB 1733 regarding open meetings. This bill would require open meetings to provide members of the public with a physical location to hear, observe, and address the state body and means to remotely hear or hear and observe the meeting and remotely address the state body without requiring public comments to be submitted prior to the meeting. This bill would allow board members to remotely participate in an open without disclosing the remote location. And this bill would also require a state body to end or adjourn the meeting if the means of remote participation fails during the meeting, restored. Those are all the watch bills I wanted to bring focus to. Is there questions about this report?
Seeing none by board members, I'd like to take public comment on the legislative report.
And this is the moderator, and we've opened up the WebEx Q&A feature to take public comment. You can click on the question mark icon to type the word comment and send, or you may raise your hand. And we do have a raised hand, so I'm going to unmute Bryce Doherty, and then we will give you 3 minutes.
Thank you. Bryce Doherty, again, on behalf of the Hearing Healthcare Providers of California. I wanted to inform the board, and the board may wish to track a few provisions in the governor's proposed budget as well. There are two very important issues that affect both hearing aid dispensers and audiologists. The first item is a proposal by the governor to restore the 10% provider rate cut that was instituted by way of AB 97 back in 2009 under the Brown administration. We've been trying to rescind that reduction for the past 13 years, and in this year's proposed budget by the governor, he includes restoration of that 10% provider rate cut for a limited number of Medi-Cal providers, including hearing aid dispensers and including audiologists, including nurses of all types, a few DME providers, and some others. I just wanted the board to know that HHP, in conjunction with the California Academy of Audiology and some of the other groups, are putting together a coalition to stand up and support that effort on behalf of the administration. So we would ask that the board take a look at that and see if that is something that they would be interested in supporting as well. There's also a provision in the governor's proposed budget this year as it relates to hearing aid coverage for children program in the Medi-Cal program. This was a budget provision that was instituted in last year's budget, and the rollout of the program has been pretty complicated. The children that were eligible for the program, there was upwards of 7,000 children who are eligible for the expanded coverage for hearing aids in the Medi-Cal program. And we're aware that only 2 children out of 40 that have been approved have received the devices. So there's an effort in this budget to expand those resources and try and get those kids as many of the hearing aids as possible. We'd also ask that the board look into that issue and consider supporting the governor's proposed budget item on that issue as well. Thank you.
And I do not see any other requests for public comment at this time. Shall I close the public comment feature?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Doherty's comments kind of leads us well into agenda item number 15, which is legislative items for future meetings. We can discuss, I think Heather has some information for us about that, and we might consider the 2 issues that Mr. Doherty brought up as well. But Heather, would you like to talk to us about a few bills that you think should be placed on the future agenda?
Yes. Since the agenda was published, some additional bills have been introduced that we will be watching for now and possibly weigh in on at a future meeting. The first one is AB 2686, which is the board sunset bill. At this point, it does not have any provisions that we have asked for in sunset report, but we do anticipate that will be amended as we go through the sunset. The next one is AB 2806 regarding child care and developmental services for preschool. This is the bill that is similar to AB 61 that we took and amended position on. It is the exact same language from last year. And then SB 1031 regarding healing arts boards inactive license fees, which would limit the renewal fee for an inactive license to 1/2 of the amount of the fee for the renewal license. And then SB 1365 regarding licensing boards procedures, which would require boards to post the criteria used to evaluate applicants with criminal convictions on the board's website. And then finally, SB 1453 regarding speech language pathologists. This bill would make changes to the requirements for performing these procedures.
Okay, thank you for that, Heather. Is there any board discussion or any questions regarding these future legislative items or items for a future agenda? I'm not sure if the issues that Mr. Doherty mentioned would actually fall under legislative items per se, as opposed to future agenda items for discussion. Can I get some direction on that?
Absolutely. The governor's budget always goes up to the legislature for consideration, and then the legislature enacts it through budget bills and budget trailer bills. So the board can definitely be discussing those once they're in a bill format. I'm guessing maybe Paul might be able to chime in on whether or not we've had governor's budget items on the list. I haven't in the past seen it that way because it's not like an actual bill to talk about until it becomes a budget bill. But we can definitely look into how to discuss that, or even just put the governor's budget as an item on the legislative items.
Hi, Cerise. Hi, everyone. This is Paul. We have actually tracked individual items in the budget, individual issues in the past. So I think we can look at these specifically and determine how we would follow up, keep everyone apprised of and update on these issues that Mr. Doherty's brought up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other board comments or discussion items? Seeing no hands, I'd like to take public comment on legislative items for future meetings.
And this is the moderator, and we've opened up the Q&A feature of WebEx for anyone who has suggestions of a future legislative item. You can look for the question mark, typically in the lower right corner of your computer screen or behind the 3-dot other options if you're on the mobile device. Type the word comment and push send. If you are on a call-in device, you can raise your hand by hitting *3. And I do not see any comment requests. Shall I close the public comment feature?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Since we only have a couple of agenda items left, I'd like to push through and perhaps we can adjourn early. The next agenda item is number 16, future agenda items. I did mention a few things that we think will be coming up when we looked at our subcommittee discussions, but I'd like to ask any board members if they have, or staff members, if they have any future agenda items we should discuss or list. Holly?
Yes. today, Merritt Wilson commented at the beginning regarding the license board's communication with those that have opted in, and the idea of sending out information to all licensees about specific topic areas and definitions, etc. So I'd like to suggest that we talk about that at our next board meeting.
Okay, thank you. Any other board members with suggested future agenda items? Seeing none, I'd like to take public comment on future agenda items.
And this is the moderator, and we've opened up the public comment feature for any suggestions of future agenda items. If you have any suggestions you'd like to make, you can look for the question mark icon and send the word comment, or you can raise your hand by pressing *3 if you're on a dial-up connection. And I do not see any requests for public comment. Shall I close that feature?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
The last agenda item is closed session because we do have a government code that directs us to meet in closed session to discuss disciplinary matters, proposed decisions, and so on. But we actually don't have any of those matters at this time, so we really don't need to hold a closed session or reopen it. So at this point, I think we have completed the agenda. I would like to ask the board if they have any further comments that they'd like to make at this point. I would just say that I'd like to thank everybody who is here today and participating. It's very helpful when we have a quorum, of course, but that we have everyone here. And a particular welcome again to Dr. Valdez for participating with us. And hope to see everybody again at our next meeting face-to-face, which will be exciting after, has it been 2 years, something like that?
2 years.
Yes.
Yeah.
It has been a while.
Absolutely. Anyway, I wish everybody a great weekend and thank you again for participating. The meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.